You're listening to the Minutes on Growth podcast, the show that brings you mindfully curated insights into relationships, spirituality, personal development, and everything in between, with your host, Tannaz Hosseinpour. Hi, everyone. It's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome back to another episode of Minutes on Growth. Today, we have Kevin Russell with us, host of the Radical Enlightenment podcast, author, clairvoyant, and consciousness accelerator. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tannaz. It's a pleasure being here with you.
I'm so glad you're on because, as I was telling you earlier, I love it when I have conscious men on the podcast because it kind of shows to us women out there that you exist, you're out there, and that this era of enlightenment is real, and we are really moving together, men and women together, kind of like holding each other's hand and like lifting the vibrational frequency of the universe and just shifting the narrative that has been kind of outdated. So I'm really, really glad you're here. Speaking about shifting narratives, let's dive right into childhood trauma and how that conditions us into who we are as adults and, this journey of unlearning and learning. And if you can just dive a little bit into that, that would be great.
Yeah. So definitely an expansive topic. And there's a lot there and a lot of opportunity there as well. So I always talk about opportunities and challenges. So the challenge that comes with experiencing childhood trauma, and just right off the bat, there are no two equally experienced traumas. It's hyper personal. So, for example, dad missing a practice or mom missing a recital can be as impactful as verbal, mental, emotional, or physical abuse. It all depends on the individual. So there's no comparison. There's no judgment on anybody's experience. Trauma is trauma, regardless of how it manifests. So the challenges that come with experiencing less than love, less than acceptance, less than empathy and understanding when we're young is that what we do experience gets baked in at the cellular level of our body, of our physiology and of our biology, of learned ways that we should be, learned ways to behave, learned ways to act, learned things that are acceptable to experience, to say, to see, to do. And those programs are largely written by the time we're 7. So from a very early age, even from the inception point, from early on in utero, we are absorbing and we are interacting with energies around us. So exchange is going on between mom and dad when we're in utero. Obviously, exchanges that go on between mom and dad when we're born. And the majority of these don't even necessarily have to be directed at us because we are biological, we are physical, we are chemical, we are energetic. The human body has an electromagnetic field that can extend up to 20 feet in any direction. So if mom and dad are fighting in the kitchen and we're playing in a different room, we are absorbing everything that's being emitted in that disagreement or in that fight. Then we get into the conscious learning. We observe how dad treats mom, how mom treats dad, how dad treats brother, how brother treats mom, and how everything interplays and intermeshes. We're literally learning the blueprint of survival and hopefully thriving, which to various degrees of success in those 7 years. From that point on, the program or the hard drive, let's call it the quantum hard drive, is created. And then from the age around 7 to 10 on up, the computer runs and we keep adding programs as we grow, as we learn. And chances are the things we experience in life are going to be reflective of what we experienced in early life, unless there is a disruption, unless we take action and disrupt the patterns and maybe even the beliefs or the constructs that are created early on, if they are less than aligning with love. And so often love gets transformed or sullied because there's tough love. There's a concept of tough love. And if I'm stern, that will provide the structure for this child to know what to do in the world. So I think the challenge with parenting comes with the concept that as a parent, we are here to inform, create, construct this other being so they can survive or live in the world. I think closer for me to the reality is that as a parent, we are stewards and we are providers for this new life. We are not here to dictate or direct or insist on ways of being, because they are independent and sovereign beings just as we are. So when we're carrying childhood trauma with us, we're carrying generations of conditioning and programming with us. And the opportunity on the other side of that challenge is to disrupt those patterns. And some of the most successful and rapid ways I've experienced of doing that is getting to the subconscious, getting to the operational layer of this quantum supercomputer that we've created in life. And there's where we have opportunity. There we can transform beliefs at the subconscious level. We can release traumas. We can move through perceptions or ways of doing things that maybe didn't align with us at our core. Maybe our intuition or instinct was always kind of that voice in the back of the head, like, okay, this is the way we're doing things, but is this the way that I'm aligned with doing things? And a lot of the time, even that voice gets drowned out because of all the conditioning that we experience and all the other voices and ways of doing things that we really embed as our own within our lives.
Wow. So much to process. But you said something that got me thinking. Everyone's trauma is, of course, valid for them and that. But how do we know there's trauma for us to disrupt if our trauma was not validated as a kid, especially if we grew up in a family where there wasn't, abuse, like there wasn't physical abuse, there wasn't verbal abuse, but there was a neglectful parent. And let's say in that culture, being a present parent isn't the norm. Parents don't go to their kids' recitals. Kids are raised with other family members or with nannies or anything of that sort. So we don't know if we're carrying trauma, because all those moments where you saw the other kids' parents be there, and you thought to yourself, well, I don't have the right to feel what I'm feeling. So you invalidated your pain. Then other people invalidated your pain. So you don't even know that there is trauma to disrupt. So what can we do there?
So one thing is just, okay, am I a thinking, breathing human? Then you're carrying trauma. It's universal. It's global. It can be more of a challenging puzzle to put all the pieces together with, if it has always been brushed under the rug, or culturally or societally, having those types of dynamics maybe isn't present. So even just that, it's almost like a negative reinforcement or a positive reinforcement in psychology. And this is always one that stuck with me. A form of positive reinforcement can be physical abuse, because it's something that's being added to the equation. A form of negative enforcement can be removal or holding back of something. So a parent not being present would be a form of negative reinforcement of understanding the way of the world. So if we're little and our parents aren't present, but our aunt or a neighbor or a grandma is, then we're going to focus on wherever we're getting the interaction as one of our primary relationships. So whatever that type of communication is, it could still very well be tough love. It could still very well be stern or rigid or within a framework. But those are the ways that we learn about the world. So, if we're boiling it down to our essence, we really thrive at a place of unconditional love. So if we've experienced anything less than unconditional love, that would be a form of trauma.
Wow. But where's the fine line between unconditional love and a parent's role to kind of create structure and discipline? Because when I think of unconditional love, I think of acceptance. Mm-hmm. But as a kid, kids, count on parents or count on their guardians to kind of maybe show them the path. I don't know. I think this is the gray zone.
So that would be, I mean, if we're talking about this example specifically, how do we not constrict a child's exploration, but also provide a framework of safety in which they can experience the world? So again, it's back to the personal responsibility and personal ownness. So as a parent, if we're using language like, because I said so, or no, don't do that, we're not really giving any reason why. And children are hyper intelligent. They are fully formed, energetic beings from the word go. When our daughter was young, we learned baby sign language. And so we were able to sign and communicate with her before the age of 1, because the vocal cords and the language of the life we're born into are still developing, but the intelligence and the understanding is already there. So really, as an adult, leaning into those experiences of explanation. It's important for us to be careful around the street because cars are dangerous and they can hit us. So we look both ways. If it's, something where a child's coloring on a wall, no, you didn't, how could you do that? You ruined the wall. That is the parent's perception. The child's perception is they're creating amazing art on this beautiful blank canvas. And so now we're talking about attachments or perceptions or ways of doing things. Well, why don't we color on the walls? Well, my mom and dad didn't let me do it, so you're sure not going to let me do it. So that's conditioning right there. It's falling back into patterns that were learned on the outside, not living from a life of intuition and inspiration from the inside. So if we were to switch that, so say the child writes on the wall with an indelible marker and it's not coming out. It's like, oh, okay. And then we repaint the wall. And then the next thing we know, we see the child going back for the wall with another permanent marker. So what we could meet resistance with resistance and ground or remove all artistic expression, or we could shift and go with the flow and provide washable markers and, or actually get a canvas that we can direct the child to. So in those experiences, to me, it's more the bumpers in a bowling alley that you see sometimes. So letting the child bowl the ball with bumpers, as opposed to holding the ball and forcing and showing the child how to bowl. Figuring out the how is up to us individually. Providing a framework that's balanced and fair is the practice that we can recreate these experiences that are beneficial all the way around.
Wow, I love that. That's conscious parenting right there. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how that child who is, given the space to explore their creativity and given explanations as to why things are the way they are, they're going to turn up, versus someone who faces resistance with resistance. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that kid who is drawing on the wall, if there is resistance there, they might grow up with this label in their mind that I'm a bad kid, I'm messy, and all of these labels that they place on themselves. And then what's going to happen? Then they're going to live their whole life with this, I guess, like this sticky note on them, thinking that is who they are, right?
Exactly. And regardless, and to your point, how do we identify the nuances of trauma? In the work that my wife and I do, everything, no matter what it is, whether it's resistance of the way the parents were doing things, or whatever we embody or whatever we internalize as our trauma, it really comes down to, if we get through all of the other labels and adjectives, it really boils down to a feeling of either being unloved or unlovable, or unworthy or worthless. And these are pretty much universals as far as clients that we work with. So regardless of the upper manifestations, what embeds at the subconscious level is usually, when we get to the core of it, one of those two. And there's other adjectives we can use around those things, but it's usually those focuses. So again, if we're drawing breath and we are in adulthood and we haven't popped the hood and really looked at what's going on at the subconscious level, there is trauma there. And that can manifest in ways of hyper-focus on success at the detriment to personal relationships or family. It can manifest as addictions or self-soothing mechanisms of any number of expression. It can be junk food, it can be substances, it can be media, it can be illicit material. All we're doing with self-soothing is we're trying to fill a perceived void on the inside, which is an expression of trauma. But the challenge is there is no void. And that's the opportunity as well. We are whole, we are complete, and we are connected to our energetic source, whatever our label for that is. What we experience bodily is all of the compacted layers of trauma and comparison and judgment and conditioning and programming that our consciousness pings off of. And it pulls these layers of dis-ease from the subconscious level and interprets those as us, interprets those as the components of our operating system, because our body is conditioned for safety at all cost. And planning, programming, and protection are its primary objectives. So when we're in this system of really survival, especially in today's modern society, so many of us are bathed in low-grade expressions of fight, flight, freeze with the 24-hour media news cycle, social media, with different expressions of capitalism and need tos and have tos and industry around the world. We get compartmentalized and we get set into what we can perceive as fixed places of being. The opportunity is to become aware of what we're bouncing off of, the beliefs, the ways of doing things. You know, if we ever catch ourselves saying, well, that's just because, or that's the way that it happened to me, so that's the way it's going to happen to you, or, well, that's the way we've always done things. Those are some ripe areas for addressing and looking at, for that we can evolve beyond the constrictive expression of those and really take a look at, well, just because it's the way we've always done it, does that mean it's the best way for us? And really opening up those types of conversations and self-analyzing, holding up that mirror. Why do I think these things? Why am I acting this way? Why do I have this belief? Those are some really powerful tools and methods of self-inquiry that we can start using to decouple ourselves from these labels or from these almost embedded ways of being.
I love that. And I think it's very, very powerful once we start having awareness of what our operating system is. However, I've noticed that, especially at the beginning, once we become aware of kind of how we've been tangoing with our trauma. So, it's been there, we weren't aware that it's there, but we're kind of playing with it. And we were allowing it to place us into this victimhood consciousness or this blaming consciousness. A certain level of guilt and shame comes up. What can we do then? How can we forgive ourselves for not knowing better?
So two things come to mind, and beautifully stated, and thank you for that insight, because it's so important. One is, my wife had a client where we're talking about awareness of programs and becoming conscious of these operating programs. And a lot of it is daily practice, daily awareness of the thoughts we're having, of the emotions that are arising or the reactions that are taking place within the body. And I like to use either brain training or mind training or brain games as vehicles to get to this place of awareness, and then recognition. And then after recognition, we get to choice. But starting with that awareness layer is really that practice. And so the client said, wait, so I have to be aware of everything I'm thinking and saying? And it's like, yeah, living a conscious life is awareness of what we're doing in the moment. So it can feel daunting. It can feel weighty. So that's one aspect. So yes, this is a daily practice of decoupling and extracting ourselves from this dance, as you so beautifully shared. The other part of the equation is this judgment and comparison aspect that is, and to your point, we almost get to it by default because it's one way that our systems use to understand its place in the world. Well, if that is X and I am Y, then that must make us different. So Dr. Seuss had a great book called The Sneetches. And if you've ever read the book, it's a differentiation between star-bellied sneetches or sneetches without stars. It is one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. If anybody has not read it, I highly recommend it. And it's a really great book to give us awareness of comparison and judgment of not only ourselves, but of others. So when we're talking about having this event horizon of awareness of trauma, and then we start to replay it and we almost see the film roll all the way back to where it started with, experience with mom or with dad or whatever our most indelible relationship was, there can be this judgment that kicks in because of the conditioning programming of, why didn't you see it before? How could you? And I work with clients and we start beating ourselves up because it's like, oh, I wish I had found you 5 years ago, or I wish I knew about this approach 10 years ago. But most likely we were not in a place 5 or 10 years ago to do anything with this awareness. So it arises when it arises. And a big part of this practice of daily awareness, and we could term it almost enlightenment living, because the state of enlightenment is not a destination, it's a practice. It's a daily awareness practice, and having those aha moments or those light bulbs go off of maybe an awareness of something in the world or an awareness of something within us. So the more open and curious we can be within ourselves, oh, I wonder why I had that reaction. Oh, that's come up a lot. Or I keep having the same relationship over and over and over again. What's going on? What's behind that? The more open and curious and kind and gentle we can be with ourselves, the more opportunity we have to really deconstruct those reactions and get away from the comparison and judgment of, oh, I can't believe I've been walking around with this for X amount of years. Instead, flip that. So that would be the challenge. The opportunity is then to flip it and say, I'm so grateful for the awareness and understanding I have right now. And this is the other challenge. There is no other thing besides right now. We try and have a linear life, and this is the future, and we're planning, or we're worrying, and that's where anxiety comes in, or we're hauling the past with us because that's what we've known of the ways of being in the world. But again, comparison and judgment, attachment and resistance. So the more that we can extract ourselves from those dances, kind and gentle, open and curious, the more opportunity we have to accelerate that healing and accelerate that return to that wholeness.
I love that. Is it possible to still, even when you have awareness, to still sometimes go back and partake in that dance?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I just did it last week. So in this physical body, we never are outside of the structures. We're never outside of the conditioning. And we can work, and I've worked diligently I'm 21, so like 5 or 6 years now of daily practice of transforming trauma, transforming emotions, transforming generational trauma, and also rewriting or redirecting subconscious programs. And even with all of that, my go-to is always the unworthy or worthless side of the equation. Even with all of that, and even with all of the expansion work I've done and awareness work, and really moving to this observational place of life as I'm living it, I still get dropped into it because we are still living within a system whose biological imperative is safety, planning, and protection at all costs. The challenge is we're not dealing with hunting down mammoth or escaping from a saber-toothed cat. We're dealing with perceptions of where do I fit in society? How do I fit into these structures that are put in place that we've all co-created, but that really aren't in alignment or in attunement with our natural states. So figuring out those relationships, and that's a challenge in and of itself. On this journey of expansion and awareness, how do I now interact with the normal world, or the more embedded world? And that's where we're now employing openness and curiousness and kindness and gentleness with ourselves, and then we turn that outward. And then we can project that and have that be our interaction layer with others. Instead of judgments and comparisons, open and curious. Well, that's not the way I do things, but why is it that way? And so the more that we can experience differences and share the different ways we do things without judgment or comparison, the more that we can accelerate everything. Because there are indigenous practices that are centuries and eons old that have been practiced forever that are very efficient, even more so than modern processes in some instances. So it's an openness to the way that everyone does things and looking at, well, how can we collaborate? How can we all win? Both in a family setting, both in a town or a society setting, both in a global setting, and also in a global setting as well.
What a powerful message, especially right now where the media really tries hard to divide everyone up and, put labels on people as if we don't have enough labels. Someone said something to me once and I loved it, said, in order for you to be right, someone has to be wrong. So Is there a different way for you to look at that, where you both feel seen, heard, valued, appreciated, respected, and all of that? And I love the way you explained judgment and non-comparison. Really, really powerful words. Thank you so much for that. If you could leave the audience with one piece of advice that you wish you had heard when you were younger,
Ooh.
Something that was perhaps one of the biggest aha moments of your life.
Wow, that's a great question. I think as a takeaway, it would have to be something along the lines of, for me, it was the worthiness, I think. So regardless of expression or regardless of how we've experienced it, every single person listening right now is worthy. You are worthy of life. You are worthy of equality because you are a human. And we are, as many differences as we have, those are things to share, not to compare. So at our core, I strongly feel and think that we are love, and we seek love and we share love. And everything we experience in the world, for the most part, tends to inhibit that in some way or form from its pure, unconditional love state. So if you're hearing this, you are worthy of all the best this world has to offer. You are worthy of unconditional love. You are worthy of absolutely anything you choose in this world is a destination or a journey to undertake and embark on that lights you up, that really speaks to your interests and utilizes your natural talents. You are worthy of all of that. And that worthiness begins on the inside, regardless of our experiences. So it's not me telling you that you're worthy that makes you worthy. That's an intrinsic natural state. That is an inalienable state that we all have. It's the practice of getting past all the other junk in the trunk that can reconnect us with that worthiness. And that's where the opportunity lies.
Goosebumps. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that reminder. I think the fact that is exactly as you said, that is our truth. But sometimes we need to be reminded of that truth because of all the noise that is surrounding us, that is trying to take us away from our core love, so that, they can feed us all the other junk. So thank you so much for that reminder and for everything you shared with us today. How can the audience hear more from you and gain more from your wisdom and insights?
So the bulk of the media, the book, we've got videos, we've got assessments. You can find that at radicalenlightenment.com. Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in accelerating the process or gaining some insight as to really what's going on at the subconscious level and making some inroads into getting to that healedness for ourselves, rapidtransformationsessions.com. Is where you can learn more about the practice. Both my wife and I offer, learn more about the science behind the work. And then also, if you're interested in booking a session or even just having a conversation, we offer free consults for anybody that's interested. So those are the two best places to find us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your time and for sharing all of that. It was really, really, really insightful. So thank you.
Tannaz, thank you so much for everything you're doing, for opening the door for so many, and for sharing. And it's invaluable work you're doing as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Speak soon. Thank you for joining us this week on Minutes on Growth. If you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now.